Hello. Let's see. I'm here in Egypt in Cairo, and it's it's quite an interesting place. Um, it's very intense, very loud. There's honking 24/7, at least here in the downtown, um, and starting at like 5 a.m. and then going till intermittently into the night. There's the azan call to prayer, which is on, blasted on loudspeakers, very loud throughout the city. And since there's a bunch of mosques around here, they're basically all overlapping over each other, so it's kind of weird cacophony of sounds. So it's not ideal if you want to sleep, if you want to be asleep at 5 a.m. But yeah, it's quite interesting also trying to walk anywhere in the city because a lot of times the cars, like there's not really any they're not dividing lines between lanes and the streets. And um I mean, thank God all the streets are basically one way, because otherwise it would be total chaos. But the cars are all just kind of like crammed in and honking and trying to get in front of each other. And although actually around here there are some actual kind of stoplights, and sometimes there's traffic cops, so you can sometimes just wait for that and cross when it's safe. But tends to be that Egyptians, and especially Egyptian men, um, they just cross like regardless. Like there would be like a lot of cars coming, and they just cross, and they just, either the cars will stop for them, or at the last minute they'll see that a car is not stopping, and so they'll kind of hold back for a second and then go behind that car. And so it's a kind of, they just kind of weave between the cars as the traffic goes. So it's pretty intense. Like, I mean, I feel like I'm all right at doing that. Like, because I don't know, I'm a bicyclist, so I kind of know what it's like to just have to find your little spot in the road. But and how to have your head on a swivel and live on your wits. But it's kind of sketchy, and I see even, some Egyptians are not super into it, like especially a lot of the women kind of hold back and wait for the light or something. And so it's not like everybody here is total finesse at doing this, but it's kind of, I guess, a national pastime or something to just. And I think there's a point of pride to just say, what, I just go, and they'll stop for me. And the cars too, they just kind of go wherever they can go whenever they can. But at the same time, I think the way that it works, and the way that it works without leading to a lot of deaths and whatnot, or at least, I haven't seen any accidents or anything, is because even though people act very aggressive and they honk a lot and they yell at each other and they act very macho, the guys like cross the street and they're like, they just put out their arm and yell at the cars. They're like, "Get out of my way, cars!" I'm like, but at the same time, there actually is a probably on some level more courtesy than there is probably in like the U.S., because otherwise it just wouldn't work. Like, at the end of the day, they hit the brakes like right before they're gonna hit the person, or the person stops or goes like right before, like they stop like right before they're gonna walk right in front of a careening taxi or something. So there's a lot more logic to it than it seems at first glance, you could say, and there's a lot more courtesy than it seems. Um, it's rare that you really see the courtesy of people saying, thanks or here, but you do sometimes see that too. But I think there's a kind of unspoken courtesy, or just at least uh, an attempt to not actually hit people and not actually hit other cars and not actually get hit by cars, which makes it kind of work. So that's different from the US. Also, there are um, checkpoints, like there are police and army like outposts on like almost every major block in Cairo, and in much of the rest of Egypt. I think Alexandria, Luxor, etc., and along the roads along the Nile. And a lot of these, I mean, I often don't know the difference between the police and the army, except when it says, police or army or whatever on their uh, vehicles and stuff. But I mean, they both are armed to the teeth. Like they both, I mean, they have like AK-47s, I guess, or AR-15s or something that looks like that. I've seen some things that look even bigger than that, like some really just ridiculously large guns. There's the kind of like, I think maybe submachine guns type thing that are more compact. Um, there are shotguns. A lot of them have shotguns. Like the guy, the one that was guarding the train station had a shotgun. You got to wonder, like, what are you gonna do with a shotgun in a train station? You're either gonna like basically kill everybody, or you're gonna maybe shoot in the air and try to. Uh, Hopefully, there's not a roof where he was. Anyway, so it's interesting that like I've seen like way more guns than I've ever seen in my life, outside of like movies and stuff. In the last month here in Egypt. Um, so it is what it is. There's a weird, is I guess like any place, there's like ways in which it's more free, more liberal. There's ways in which it's more illiberal, more authoritarian. Like, I think alcohol is technically illegal for at least for Egyptians. I think like tourists are allowed to drink, but I don't really recommend it. I don't know. I tried like an Egyptian beer, and I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just drank too much. Maybe it's just me and my constitution, but it gave me like a big headache like after a few hours, which, yeah, and a stomach ache, I think. So I don't know if that was the beer or the water they made it with, or just me like reacting to uh, drinking after a little while of not drinking. But I had two of the Stella beers, which is their main beer here, and they're kind of large for a beer, I think, or at least I think they were larger than the Heinekens that they were selling here, which are also made here and also kind of seem to not be as good as a real Heineken. It seemed to like give my stomach and maybe my head a little bit of a turn for the worse. But yeah, it's a very intense place. I've came here for archaeology, so I've been traveling around a bit. Going to Luxor, Alexandria, Abu Simbel, and Aswan. Uh, but it's I mean, for me, I guess it's hard for me, the mosquitoes here, like in Cairo, because where I live in California, the mosquitoes are, I think there are mosquitoes, but there are just not very many of them for some reason. Um, so maybe I'm spoiled, but mosquitoes love me, so it's not great to be around a lot of them. Um, but apparently there's not really malaria here for some reason. Somehow they got rid of the malaria or something. Um, so that's good. Um, and in terms of the COVID, I think it's in some ways, a lot of places are more lax compared to the US in terms of like wearing masks and that kind of thing. But there are also a lot of people wearing masks, like in the city, and certainly in Cairo, not in Alexandria. In Alexandria, I saw very few masks, um, and in a way, it was good to wear a mask walking around Cairo just for the pollution, because apparently there's a very high particulate pollution. There's very little, if any, regulation on emissions from vehicles. So there are buses that go around that you just see like it just looks like soot or like almost just like black sand just like pouring out of the sauce pipe. Like it just looks like solid. Like you could maybe just grab a handful of it. So yeah, I think in that's why some have said that Cairo has some of the worst pollution in the world. So the mask hopefully helped with that a bit. And also, I think maybe this time of year there's agricultural burning throughout Egypt, so that's a lot of Egypt smells like smoke. Um, which is also probably not great to breathe, so the masks probably help for that. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Hadn't got a chance. I'm leaving tonight, and I've been here almost a month, or since the 12th or something. So I I hadn't got a chance to do a video from here. So I just wanted to do something just to say, hey, I'm in Egypt. It was not my intention to like, I don't know, come here during the COVID or during the lockdowns or whatever. This was a trip that had been planned beforehand, and uh, it was something where it just seemed like I wasn't clear that I would be able to reschedule it, and I don't have any money. So this ticket was like the only thing of value that I had left, basically, and I basically just grabbed it and my like $600 Trump bucks or whatever stimulus money and went to Egypt. It was very haphazard getting here. Um, it was delayed, and then got stuck in London, and then had to do a second COVID test. I did two COVID tests, PCR tests with negative results, and um, so yeah, I was telling a friend that it was kind of like I had to almost part the sea just to get here. Like even in London, they almost sent me back home, and I kind of had to cajole and haggle and beg, and eventually got them to let me take a second PCR test there, because they were saying my original test was out of date because of the airlines had postponed the flight, and then that set it back, so it was a day too early, the test, and it was not recent enough. So I had to get another test in London, which meant I had to stay in London to wait for the results for 48 hours. But luckily, at the end, the airlines, which is Air Canada, actually paid for my hotel while I waited. And so, quarantined in my hotel room or whatever. And so, you know, it all worked out. It all worked out a lot better than I could have. And, I got to see a lot of ancient sites. I got to see, the kind of original pyramid, the step pyramid of Djoser, the famous, great pyramids at Giza, pyramid of Khufu and Khafre and whatever, and the pyramids at Dashur, which are built by the father of Khufu. I mean, they say that he's like his name is Neferu or something. That he like built 3 pyramids. So I only saw 2 of them. I went inside 2 of them. They're massive. Like one of them is basically as big as the Great Pyramid, like a little bit shy of the Great Pyramid, and basically looks the same as the Great Pyramid, but is much more awesome to explore because you can go inside and really explore the whole thing. Whereas in the Great Pyramid, they only let you go into like the first room and come back. Whereas this, I literally like wore out my legs just walking, to the end of the passageways and then back out of 2 pyramids. It was like 400 steps in each, and then walking there and back, 800 steps, and then doing that in 2 pyramids. So it was like 1,600 steps, and I'd already been like on my feet for the whole month. So yeah, I don't know why I'm walking around right now. It's probably a bad idea, but it's maybe it helps me, my thought flow. So anyway, I came here partly to share my discoveries and hopefully make new discoveries. I have made some new discoveries and developed some of my understanding of ancient Egypt. I discovered that the ancient Egyptian underworld was America, or like included America. Was basically the antipodal lands where the sun goes at night. And this is the underworld for California, where I'm from, or where I live. I live in Northern California on the coast, and there's a 10-hour difference, which means basically when it's nighttime here, it's daytime in California. And I mean, I think the absolute antipode of Egypt would be Hawaii, from what I can tell. It's basically when it's like midnight in Egypt, it's noon in Hawaii. But so that whole kind of antipodal hemisphere would be the underworld. But I think the Americas were especially considered to be kind of the underworld, or the maybe the most important of the underworlds. By the ancient Egyptians, they called it Amentet Neferet, which means the beautiful West. And they had some ancient maps of it, which I discovered that they were already known. They were already like published online, whatever, but nobody had recognized what they were because they were not oriented north, and also just people don't believe that the ancient Egyptians were capable of like getting in a boat and crossing some water. So they're not looking for this kind of thing, and they don't believe it if they see it. So yeah, I came here partly to kind of disseminate that information, which I've had kind of like limited success with. I printed out a bunch of copies of like the maps and some evidence of Egyptian settlements in Mexico, basically Egyptian influence on the Aztecs and Mayans and Mixtecs. But so I just was handing those out in Cairo to like random passersby, and got some new members for my Facebook group, Pre-Columbian Transoceanic Contact. So I'm almost gonna break 17,000 members in there, and but ultimately there hasn't been a major breakthrough in terms of like, I don't know. I tried to email a lot of Egyptologists, but I was kind of late doing that. But I have not heard back from them. I emailed like everybody in the anthro socio slash Egyptology department at the American University in Cairo, since I knew they would, you know, they would know English, they would be able to read my emails. But so far, no reply from any of them, which is not necessarily a surprise because my discoveries upend their whole kind of life's work. And it kind of shows that they've been teaching, or at least probably a lot of them have been teaching falsehoods for their whole career. But you know, still, it's if they want to really call themselves scientists, it's incumbent on them to acknowledge their error and acknowledge the truth. But academia is very conservative that way, and very opportunistic, and kind of, you know, a lot of academics are very selfish. But who knows? Maybe these ones are different, and maybe they're just taking a while to digest the information, and they'll get back to me. So here's hoping. Um, anyway, I'm gonna go get my last supper of in Egypt. I'm gonna try to go to this restaurant called El Prince, which is supposed to be really good Egyptian food with like decent prices. And so yeah, sending love from Egypt, um, Kemet, and about to fly to the underworld, about to fly to Egypt's underworld, which is you know, flying, basically flying the solar bark with Ra, because my flight goes to, you know, to America, to North America, Vancouver actually, and then down to SF. But basically my flight leaves Germany, like I fly to Germany and then to Vancouver, and the flight from Germany to Vancouver, you know, arrives like an hour later. So I guess even an airplane is a little bit slower than the sun. But basically, I'll be flying alongside Ra in the solar bark, just like the pharaohs were supposed to do, going down to the underworld to be reborn. Just as I came here to this underworld to be reborn in some way, um, and to study archaeology. So anyway, uh, Egypt is a trip, and it's a, you know, very awesome country, you know, a lot of ways. And all right, take care. Peace.